I'd like to introduce my colleagues on my right, my fellow councillors, and we will be making the decisions on the applications in front of us this evening. To my left are the planning officers who will be presenting their reports and giving us their professional advice, and also will be answering our questions. And I'd like to thank them for all of their hard work in preparing the committee reports this evening. So, turning to the agenda, are there any apologies for absence?
There are no apologies for absence, Chair.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations? No declarations. Minutes of the previous meetings. I have two sets of minutes here. One is from the 25th of February, Councillor Mackover. Shall I sign off the minutes? And also for the 17th of December, I was not present at this committee meeting. Councillor Whedon-Stand, shall I sign off the minutes? So those minutes are approved. Now, the order of play for this evening will be as listed on the speakers list. So we do have a long agenda today and quite a few speakers, so I apologise to those of you who will have to wait to hear your application later on in the evening. And at the appropriate time, I will ask the objector or supporter and the applicant to speak to the committee. And each objector or supporter will have a total of 3 minutes, except for the case of the our first application, where there'll be 5 minutes, as Councillor Gardner has registered to speak. So both groups will have 5 minutes each. And the committee will then ask questions of those speakers, and we can't allow anybody to speak outside of those formal mechanisms. So we will start with the application at 45 Ledbury Road. Ms. Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to draw members' attention to the committee addendum report, which includes amendments to the officer's report and the associated conditions. This is an application for planning permission for a change of use from a bar restaurant to a restaurant and private members club, along with external alterations which include the construction of a mansard roof, rear extension with glazed roof, along with alterations to the front elevation. The site is an existing bar and restaurant and was previously used as Beach Blanket Babylon. The site is located on the western side of Ledbury Road, north of the junction with Ledbury Mews West. The property is not listed itself, but is within the Pembridge Conservation Area. This slide shows the existing basement and ground floor plan. As existing, there is a restaurant use and table cover at the ground floor level, with an external terrace at the front. This slide shows the proposed ground floor plan, which includes a covered courtyard area to the rear, which would accommodate more seating. The proposed floor plan also shows new French doors to the front external terrace area. This slide shows the proposed first floor plan, which shows the restaurant along with the glazed roof to the rear. Members will note from this plan that 4 of the roof lights serving the extension would be automatic openable vents, with the remaining roof lights fixed shut. This slide shows the existing and proposed front elevations. Members will note the additional French doors at the front elevation. This slide shows a visual of the proposed development, including the enclosed courtyard with the glazed roof. And this slide shows a visual of both the front and rear elevations, which members may find useful, showing the constructed mansard roof. This application is recommended for approval for the reasons set out in the officer's report and subject to the recommended conditions. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wesley. So I would now like to invite the objectors to speak. Can you please introduce yourselves? And you will have 5 minutes to speak as a group, but allocate the minutes as you would like.
Councillor Gardner. if I could be told when my 2 minutes are up, please.
Sure.
The residents are pleased to see this site returning to use. The challenge with any business significantly increasing the size and hours of operation, as here, is minimising the impact on the neighbours and the local residential amenity. Firstly, transportation. The significant increase in hours, 7 days a week, is something no one can truly assess in advance. Our officers recognise this is a key area, and I ask that we go further than Condition 14 and ask for a revised operational management plan to be brought back to this committee so that residents can provide input after the premises has been fully operational for at least 6 months. Secondly, rubbish. There's no mention of the applicant's proposal to compact waste in their basement and bring it up to street level on a mechanical lift or hoist at the front of the premises, or to take deliveries via the same hoist. I ask for a refuse management plan condition to cover hours, use of operation and maintenance for refuse and delivery. Thirdly, control of noise leakage from the premises. At the licensing hearing, residents asked for a sound lobby to be installed inside the front door. The proposed curtain doesn't do much to attenuate the noise escape, so we ask that Condition 15 refers to a solid internal acoustic booth being installed. Similarly, openable French windows, roofs, windows don't keep noise inside, and we ask that their closure at all times is conditioned. And if openable, no audible music should be heard from outside. Given the venue plans to increase the daily opening from 8 a.m., to 8 a.m. as opposed to noon till 1 a.m., we ask that you restrict weekend opening hours to 10 a.m. so that to give the residents some respite. And lastly, can blinds be a requirement for the rear roof, opening from dusk until 8 a.m., so as to control light pollution, as we all know about those late-night cleaners. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner.
Shubha Chawla. I'm speaking for a group of numerous local residents. We have 3 objections to planning, each capable of being met by conditions. Firstly, opening hours. We object to the proposed opening hours. Ledbury Road is ordinarily a quiet residential street, and these premises should mirror the hours stipulated for the previous operators, thereby limiting noise and inconvenience to the surrounding area. We ask for opening times of 10 a.m. to midnight, Monday to Saturday, and 10 a.m. to midnight on Sundays, in line with licensing. Secondly, noise emission. We urge the Council to impose 3 conditions before granting planning permission. 1, that all windows and doors, except the front door and fire doors, be fixed and non-opening to reduce noise, including the roof. That a solid internal lobby be created with fixed internal doors, limiting noise from patrons arriving and leaving, as the applicant has informally agreed. Permission to be refused for the proposed French doors on the ground floor. Obviously, noise will emanate from opening French doors. Adding to that, the site is located in a conservation area, so the windows must align with the architectural character of the existing frontages. The proposed French doors do not, so what is their point if they are not meant to be opened? Finally, capacity. We understand that there has to be a balance between business interests and what the right solution for the immediate area would be. A capacity of 214 patrons will change the character of this residential neighbourhood, and it will impact negatively on life in the vicinity. The application therefore currently fails the Director's key test of whether the proposal would have an acceptable impact on neighbouring occupiers. This renders the change of use at the scale requested inappropriate for Ledbury Road and should be reconsidered. It will aggravate the nuisance to local residents and businesses. More people, more traffic, more noise disruption, increased deliveries and rubbish collections, all adding further congestion to a narrow road. Given that it is uncharted territory regarding size, hours of usage, and transport impact, we ask that this is made as a personal planning permission to the applicant. We would also ask, as Joanna has said, that 6
5
months...
minutes. Please finish up if you can.
Yeah, 6 months after fully opening, the general manager of the premises agrees to meet residents to formally review matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'd now like to invite the applicants, the agents, to address the committee. Where are you? Okay. So as with the first group, you have 5 minutes. Please do introduce yourselves when you come to speak.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Sean Coogan, and I'm the General Manager of Maison Estelle in Mayfair, the first of Ezra's private members' clubs. Along with Estelle Manor in Oxfordshire, we have a reputation for excellence and good neighbourly relations. At number 45 Ledbury Road, we are committed to continuing this approach, restoring a neglected heritage building which had a very disruptive hospitality operator for over 30 years and reintegrating it into the life of Westbourne Grove. We will operate in a way that builds trust with the local community, and the restaurant will be open to the public for everyone to enjoy. From the very beginning, we recognised the need to listen to concerns from neighbours, councillors, and residents' groups. And as such, we have made a series of meaningful changes to the scheme, including reducing the potential for noise and light disruption, reducing the proposed opening and closing times, incorporating an internal entrance lobby with fixed doors, switching from an openable roof over the rear courtyard to fixed glazing, developing a robust operational management plan to be conditioned as part of any planning consent, which includes at least one member of staff on the door each evening from 7 p.m, and providing a commitment to ongoing community liaison and regular meetings to discuss any operational concerns. These changes reflect a sincere effort to bring a foundation of trust with the local community, and they are rooted in the kind of responsible management that has defined Ezra's existing venues. Our proposal represents a £12 million investment in the local economy and will create around 80 new jobs in hospitality operations and support services. Many of these roles will be filled locally with opportunities for training, career development, and progression within a growing hospitality group. We have engaged with the Council's Economic Development team to ensure these opportunities reflect local priorities. We are committed to becoming a trusted and long-term neighbour in Notting Hill. I hope that the Planning Committee recognises the quality of this application and the extent of the changes made in response to local voices. And I very much hope you will be able to support us this evening. I have with me a full professional team if you would like to ask any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will now start with questions. Councillor Bakhtiar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got few questions for the applicants and few for the objectors. I'll start with the applicant. First note is I received from Councillor Gardner. She is very concerned about a compactor machine you are proposed to put in the basement for rubbish collecting. If you tell us exactly, she is concerned and the residents are concerned about the noise this compactor might make. And the second note is the French doors. Are you prepared to give up the French doors on the ground floor? Opening hours. Initially, it was 7 a.m. to 12:30 to 1 a.m. But now in the addendum report, I've seen it change to 8 a.m. to 12:30 to 1 a.m. Is that still the case? And my final note is security management. You are proposing to have one security guard at the door all the time. Do you think you could handle the security with one guard to be there at the door, or would you consider allocating more people to be, their job is to guard the pavement specifically all the times? And I will ask the questions to the objectors later after your answers.
Hi, good evening, committee. My name is Oliver Jefferson. I'm the planning consultant representing the applicant. To take those questions in order, so the compactor is there. The intention is for that to reduce noise with regards to matters such as bottles on the street. So that is all dealt with within the basement level before being brought up to street for bin collection. The French doors will be subject to a condition of the licence that they're closed from 9 p.m. onwards, as are all other windows and doors. And the intention is generally to keep them closed during operational hours due to allowing for internal cooling of the premises. The hours that you quoted, I believe, are correct as per the officer's report and are consistent with the premises licence. And as Sean has said, are a reduction in what we originally sought through consultation with neighbours. And the security guard on the door is a minimum requirement, but really reflects the nature of the operation as a restaurant and a private members club, as opposed to more of a sort of late night venue. And we're not expecting that there will be management concerns that would require a significant presence of security staff. I don't know if my colleagues have anything to add to that.
Yeah, just to second what Oliver said there, it is a minimum of one security staff in line with the fact that it's a restaurant and members club and not a nightlife space. But of course, as responsible operators, we will ensure that there are enough people on the door, as with the staff across the venue, to cater for the volume at the time.
Thank you. And similar questions to the objectors. Councillor Gardner, thank you very much for your thorough letter, explained everything, all the concerns of residents and yourselves. Are you happy with the answers you've received from the applicant? And secondly, Shubha, yeah, you've talked about French doors. You've heard that the applicant is prepared to manage the French doors, opening the French doors. I want you guys to think about conditions, proper conditions, that we could take your concerns on board while balancing the interest of all parties. Thank you.
If I may just reply about the compactor. The compactor, one would hope, would be conditioned to be on noise vibrating pads. For me, the concern is actually the hoist or the lift up to street level, and that I don't think is addressed. I think the compactor is probably an internal issue, but I don't believe there's anything in the conditions that talks about the maintenance or the care for the external hoist that takes it up to ground level in terms of the hours of operation.
Thank you, Councillor Bakhtiar. On the French doors, the problem with that is that if you have those doors and they open, they will be opened. Our main concern, our other main concern about the doors is that nowhere along that stretch of Ledbury Road are there any French doors. It just does not fit in the architectural groove in the area. So we don't want them.
I think it's fair to say Fiona Fleming-Brown from the Pembridge Association, who was due to be here tonight, was going to talk about very much the character of the street, which is windows and wooden panels underneath. Given that the applicant has just said that their intention is to keep them closed, one does wonder what they're adding aesthetically, and indeed if we could just get them removed, because I think that would give peace of mind to all the residents as well.
Yeah.
They also talk about the state-of-the-art air conditioning, which will only operate efficiently if the windows are closed. So what's the point of the French doors?
Thank you very much.
Actually, I just wanted to ask a question before passing over to Councillor Svedeniak, which is there seem to be some inconsistencies within what is in the application and what is now being talked about. So just so everybody's clear about what we're discussing this evening, I think it would be helpful to talk about some of those inconsistencies, and we will check with officers afterwards. But in particular, I wanted to ask about the roof, the retractable roof, what your plans are for that now. And, you know, I do appreciate you've talked to residents and you've had consultations and plans have changed. So obviously we think that's a good thing that you've consulted with people. But tell us about the roof. Tell us about your plans for the acoustic lobby, whether it's a corridor, a door, a curtain. I think it's just unclear. And also about the French doors. And perhaps while you're talking about the French doors, maybe you could answer some of the objectors' suggestions about having windows, panels, if they're not going to be open, whether you think they're integral to your plans, just where you've got to with them.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Yes, so the retractable roof, the history of that is that the proposals originally included a retractable roof, and with the idea of that being an open terrace to the rear, which is partly the case with the current setup of the building. In consultation with neighbours, the position now is that has been amended so that it's a fixed roof, so it's entirely fixed. The only movable parts are 4 smoke ventilation panels, which will be automatically controlled in the event of emergency fire, etc. So those will also remain fixed shut at all times unless there is that emergency. There is a condition on the licence that requires those to be fixed shut, and that's how they're shown on the most recent drawing of the windows. But I appreciate through the history of that there's been a degree of confusion about how that's come about. But that should be fully clear that they are not retractable; they're fully fixed. In relation to the lobby, the intention is for that to be again a solid lobby with solid doors internally in order to manage flow of people and to help with any sort of noise outbreak from that front door. We've negotiated a change to the conditions which the officers can confirm, which will enable us to submit a further drawing post-decision in order to fully approve the details of that element. And then I think, and the last question in relation to the French doors, I think I'll pass to Sean just to talk about the implications of that in terms of the interior of the property and how that works from a sort of operational perspective and in terms of the interior design, etc.
Thank you. So the idea of the French doors in the first place were to maximise the light as much as possible at the front part of the restaurant. You're certainly right to say that the aircon is maximised with those doors being shut, and we do anticipate that they will be shut most of the time. We would just prefer the flexibility of being able to have them open if absolutely required. If the aircon doesn't work, for example, or if somebody sitting next to the window on a warm day would prefer to have fresh air.
Thank you. Councillor Svedeniak.
Thank you. So I think this looks like a positive addition to Notting Hill, and I note that lots of people have written in to support the application, but I think that local residents have some justifiable concerns around noise and light pollution. So forgive me for, I think we've spoken about these French doors a lot. I just want to clarify, are they open, these French doors, until 9 p.m? Is that the situation? Yes. And so with the French doors being open and possibly other windows inside the building, what will you do to minimize noise pollution and ensure that, I assume there'll be speakers or music during the day. Can you say that all the speakers will face inwards, be away from doors and windows? So that's my first question. And the second one is around opening hours. I think a few people have mentioned that they'd like opening hours on weekends to begin at 10 a.m. Is that something that you would consider?
Yes, thank you. Andrew Bridge. I'm the project manager overseeing the design, construction and cost management of the project. If I may respond on the question of noise. The works that are being proposed are undertaken on the back of a robust technical solution to make sure that no noise is heard outside of the building in accordance with the Council's recommendations. We've consulted with noise consultants, sound consultants, and effectively, I suppose the best way I can describe it is we're forming a box within a box. We are undertaking significant sound proofing throughout the whole of the building, both walls, floors and ceilings, driven around the existing background ambient noise level and the existing structure, which is found to be wholly inadequate for sound reducing qualities, thus a very extensive technical solution. So speakers, music, yes, all pointing inwards, all on anti-vibration mountings. We've been into our immediate neighbours next door, undertaken sound readings, and it's as I say, it's a technically robust solution. If I may just clarify with regard to any apprehension that windows are going to be opened, inevitably windows can be opened, but the nature of the venue is that the windows will ostensibly remain shut. The discussion did come up at liquor licensing, and there we quite rightly stated that we do need the ability to open the windows in the case of emergencies such as failure of air conditioning, but it is not intended that the windows be openable on a day-to-day operational basis. The French doors at the terrace level, yes, by nature of the name, they are doors. We would like some ability to open the doors. They go out onto the external terrace. There's a degree of operational side of things there, whereby serving guests on the terrace through the front entrance door has its challenges with food and drink going through the same door where guests and customers are coming in. So a degree of flexibility would be appreciated there as well.
Sorry, a 10 a.m. start at weekends. I think that the previous, was it Beach Blanket Babylon opened at noon? So I think there's some concerns that it might be a bit too early for residents at the weekend.
If I may answer that, Councillor. We first and foremost, the ground floor restaurant is a neighbourhood space. And we'd like to open for a breakfast service for the neighbourhood. The same goes for the private members aspect of the property. Our members' expectations would be that that there would be an amenity to be able to come and have breakfast in the morning, which is why we'd like to propose 8 a.m.
Councillor Whedon-Sands.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To the applicants, well, the last time that I was at Maison as a guest, I think it took about half an hour to be served a drink, so I hope the service here will be a bit better than that. But just on the points that the objectors raised, I think we have dealt with a number of them, but I think Councillor Gardner had about 7, I counted, conditions that she'd like to request, and we have touched on a few. But I would like just to touch on some of the others to see if, to my mind, as an initial reading, seemed perfectly reasonable. If for you there'd be an issue, or it's something that you would be happy to sign up to if we were to add them onto the application. So just to run through them, if you'd like to be reminded, there's the transport issue that Councillor Gardner has asked for a operational management plan to help make sure that there aren't any transportation issues. Would that be a problem for you?
No, not at all. It is already conditioned that we submit. So there's a draft operational management statement with the application, and there's a condition requiring that to be finalised as a condition of any permission.
And for it to come back to committee, that wouldn't be an issue for you?
Well, I would potentially defer that to your officers, but I think, given that the details have been in the public domain already and subject to this forum, it may not be necessary, but I suppose it's sort of not my position to say. I think it would be unnecessary in my view, but I would maybe ask for officers to comment on that as well.
Yeah, we've discussed the French doors and the hours at the weekend. The internal lobby, the objectors have asked for a solid internal acoustic lobby booth door and not a curtain.
Yes, so the intention is for a solid door to go in due to the nature of how the scheme evolved over time in response to comments. Okay. We need to address that again through a condition which has been discussed with officers. And
you're happy, there's no issue there for you? You're happy with that as a condition? Perfect. In terms of the rubbish, that's something as well that Councillor Gardner raised as a major concern for her. Could you comment on that? Right? We all know that rubbish is a big issue for lots of our residents, so
yes, so that's within the scope of the operational management statement, so that will be addressed through that document.
Okay. And then the blinds, was a request for blinds to go as internal blinds to be used from dusk until 8 a.m. Is that also?
Yes, so we're happy with that. We have shown on one of the drawings with the application a lighting and blind strategy. Again, that can be an element which goes within the topics or the scope of the operational management plan.
Fine, perfect. So just to throw that back then to the objectors, are you slightly persuaded by what you've heard tonight that there are enough controls that should this be approved with the conditions as they are, that they match what you're requesting and that it would have limited impact on you?
Some of them, of course, we're happy with. We welcome the fixed lobby with the fixed doors. Thank you. Yeah, transport, we would like that to come back to committee, please. It's not been discussed in enough detail. It's a narrow street, and I live in the Mews in the back, which is completely residential. There is no gate, we're not allowed a gate, and so we are going to get footfall in the back, and probably not very pleasant footfall at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. There are many things about the transport report that don't sit very comfortably with us. No one's going to get on a bike at 1 a.m. from an exclusive private members club to go home. Thank you.
I think what I would just add is it would be beneficial to come back to committee on the transport on the very basis that I don't think anybody really knows the impact. Even the officer's report talks about the challenge for private members clubs, and there isn't enough data out there. So actually I think seeing how it operates will be beneficial to both residents and the applicant, and then we as a council can look at whether we can improve the conditions or the transport. So appreciate the applicant may not want that, but I would ask for you if you could grant that. Thank you.
And if I may, just very quickly on the rubbish, Councillor Gardner, perhaps you could touch on that if that.
Yes, so there was I think it was a sheet or two about deliveries and rubbish, but there are no details whatsoever about the hoist or the mechanism. So for me, that's a glaring admission. I would expect to. I live at the back of Tesco's. I can hear their shutter when they don't oil it. They do have a condition. It's that sort of irritation that actually I think a planning condition to cover the maintenance and the hours of operation would be very useful. I mean, we do, as a council, there is a restriction in the licence that says you can't leave rubbish out between this hour and this hour. But then if you're bringing up a lot of rubbish all of a sudden in the morning, much earlier than that, I think we as a council should be putting some restrictions on how that hoist operates and works and the hours at which it's operated. So I would welcome a condition, yes, please.
Okay, I just have a couple of last questions before we move to officers. So one question I had was about the mansard windows at the back, and there were a couple of objections from residents that live in the mews behind about overlooking. And I just wondered whether you would be open to having obscured glass, because there is a concern that the new windows from the mansard will be looking into bedrooms. So that's the first question. The second question is, there was talk of a personal permission, i.e. the planning permission is given to you and to no one else. And I guess the concern here is that we are slightly in unknown waters. Obviously, we want to support you. We welcome the site coming back into use. I mean, everybody wants to see the investment. But I guess there is a nervousness about, obviously we know who you are. We know that you're not going to run off and sell the property to somebody else. But, these things do happen. So how you would feel about that? Those two questions, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just so on the rear-facing windows from the mansard, two of those are to a plant room, and one of them is to a stair. So in that sense, I don't think there should be any material overlooking. I think in relation to a sense of overlooking, then we wouldn't have an issue with them being obscure glaze if that assisted with the matter.
Okay, and what about the personal permission? How do you feel about that?
I think, I'll let the applicant speak as well on this. From a planning point of view, I think there are sufficient detailed controls that would be applied to this permission so that you could, or the council could satisfactorily manage it, even if it was to change operator. But that's certainly not the intention. So I suppose from a non-planning point of view, looking at the applicant here, I suppose there'd be no massive objection to it.
I'm not saying it's the answer, but I guess what we're all trying to get at here is, there are significant differences between what you're proposing and what has happened in the past. And what has happened in the past, I take your point that it wasn't an ideal operator, but there were issues. So I guess when you start to extend the opening hours, when you start to extend the capacity, when you have French doors and they're serving on the street, all these things are happening. I'm sure you can understand why residents are concerned, and we're not here to stop you from bringing the site back into use, which we want to see, but we just want to make sure that we give some comfort to the residents. So I guess what we're trying to explore here is what can we do to help them with all your good intentions, which we hear and we believe. We just think it would give them some comfort if we could do something to, I don't know whether it's a personal permission, I don't know whether it's more conditions. I guess we're just trying to ask what you feel comfortable with so that we can then work with the officers to get something that the residents are comfortable with. I
think, thank you, and that's all understood. And I think, firstly, as we've explained, there's been quite an extensive period of engaging with neighbours, and we understand there's a lot of residents around the area, and it's quite a sort of close environment, and we understand all of the sensitivities around that. To my mind, the operational management statement and the details of that already contains and will be required to contain, as well as measures such as the extensive soundproofing and the controls in the licence on window opening, all will address it to a very high degree, and therefore those matters that are of concern to neighbours can be fully resolved through engaging with us on that operational management statement. And also there is a commitment for quarterly and ongoing liaison with residents as part of that process. So I think there are measures in there to give you that comfort.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll move on. Oh, I'm so sorry, Councillor Mack.
Good evening, and I just say in appreciation of the dialogue that we don't always see between the applicant and residents in refining some of these points. But I'm just noting it can be quite substantial. I was just looking at the figures in the report and the figures that we're hearing. So we've got 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, 200 plus guests and 100 staff. There's approximate numbers from the report. Say you have 200, each spending 2 hours there. That looks like about 11,000 meals a week. And that's when things like transport and rubbish, that could be a lot of bottles being crushed in the compactor and then hauled up to the pavement and left for collection at approximately 11 p.m. But not all rubbish collection companies are prompt, and not a lot of them are quiet when it comes to throwing bags or bales of bottles into backs of metal trucks. And that's something that does come up. And that's why the two things that I wanted to mention here, well, there's three points just to make sure I understand them. The first is, on transport and rubbish, this is really something where you can plan beautifully, but the operation is what matters to residents. And so seeing how this works, first of all, making sure that the operational plan is as good as it can be before you start. I think that's something we've all been discussing and thinking about. And then secondly, seeing how it works in practice and it coming back for review by environmental health particularly on these points. I mean, another point on transport is that 200 people leaving late at night, no one, in my experience, knows how to close a taxi or minicab door without waking everybody up. It's just the rest of the road is silent, and every door close, even if it's an electric vehicle in the future, that'll be a shock noise that reverberates between buildings. Those are the sort of things that residents will pick up on, and that's why operational plans are important. Certain other quality operators have far more than one staff member outside, particularly for dispersing. When you leave after a good evening, there's a chance that people continue the conversation at volume on the street. So those are the things that we're being cautious about. I don't think you necessarily can have easy answers to that, other than the operational plan has got to be very good and tested. Just on other things that happen on operational plans, which is why it's so important to us, things like how many of the 200 every 2 hours will drive and want to park on single yellow lines, other places, residents parking, and that can also impact the amenity for residents. So I note that. Just on the point on French doors, this is a question. Have I understood correctly that you require the French doors for two reasons? One is to introduce more light into the dining room, and the second is to be able to service the terrace, because it's difficult for staff to come out with food and drinks through the soundproof lobby that we've talked about. Is that right?
If I may, could I just come back on the transport point, just as a general point, just to note that we have Alex here from Markides Associates, who can talk about that in, in more detail in terms of comings and goings. Worth mentioning that, obviously this was an operational bar restaurant before and a purpose-built pub before that, so we're looking at sort of comparing what the operation was before with less management controls than what we're proposing now. And the overall capacity of the venue at 270 is lower than what was previously allowed at Beach Blanket Babylon. That capacity was 350. So I think that's worth sort of bearing in mind in terms of comparing. We're not looking at an impact of an entirely new operation. It's sort of a change of use along similar lines of what went before. And we can also talk in more detail, if it's helpful, about how Estelle manages dispersal, comings and goings, and their experience.
Yeah, and those are exactly the sort of things that would be very much explored. We're not going to go through line by line tonight, and that's why that's got to be focused on elsewhere. So, on the point of the French doors, you want the light through them, but you also need access to serve people on the terrace, and those would therefore have to be open until the terrace becomes smokers only at 9 p.m. Is that my understanding?
I think there's more, so it's more about the flexibility to have them open at certain times of day, certain conditions. It's not that we're entirely reliant on those doors to service the terrace. Mm-hmm. Particularly, once they're closed, then that servicing will have to go through the single point of entry.
Yeah. And I noticed in the opening remarks, the applicant spoke about this is something that we want to be for the long term. We want we're a high quality trusted operation. We're going to own and operate this. I do draw a distinction between your level of quality and care and attention that you're talking about compared with some other operators that might have been there in the past or elsewhere in the borough, and that's why those sorts of things are very important for local residents to know that they're not giving a consent that could just be flipped into some completely different sort of operator that could operate a extremely large 270 capacity bar for these hours 7 days a week with no food being served at all. That's the concerns. All right, no, thank you for being straightforward on that. Thank you.
Councillor Batty, last question.
Thank you. One small clarification. I did ask about the waste management, which is a major concern, but I didn't get the answer. So did you see, or have you used the hoist which is using, what's the level of noise it's going to produce? Because this is a major concern.
Thank you. Yeah, to just clarify, it's not an external hoist. It is internal within the hereditamент of the building, and it rises up to the terrace level, and there are going to be opening hatch doors. And I fully accept the contention that those hatch doors, if they're not maintained properly, can cause a noise, a bit like a loose manhole in the road when a car goes over it, very annoying. So we're happy to be conditioned to make sure that there's some sort of management process in order to manage those doors. But the actual hoist itself is an electric motor. The electric motor will be within the building, and clearly as the electric motor would be able to be heard in the vicinity as the doors open, but essentially it is an internal hoist operating internally until such time as the hatch doors open, because as the hoist comes up, the hatch doors open. As the hoist goes down, the hatch doors close. I think it's as best as possible solution as we can come up with, given the previous operator's way of removing rubbish was plastic bags thrown out on the street and wheelie bins out the back.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll now turn to questions for officers. Councillor Zvodenik.
Thank you. The applicants have reassured us that they will be undergoing significant soundproofing. So my question to the officers is whether you think the existing conditions relating to sound, so I think that's 8 on services, plants and vents, and 11 on sound insulation measures, are adequate or meet the concerns of the objectors who proposed a condition that no audible music should be heard outside the premises at any time.
Yep, so the conditions number 8, 9, 10, 11 all cover the acoustic side of things, but we could include an additional condition saying that no noise would be audible outside of the premises. We do have a standard condition that would cover that as well if members wanted to include that as a further additional condition.
Yeah, is that a sort of reasonable condition that is used quite often in
Yes.
these circumstances?
Yeah, it's a standard condition which we do apply quite a lot in the borough. So we could include it in this particular instance in addition to all the other acoustic conditions to strengthen it.
Councillor Bhatia.
Thank you. Coming back to the hoist mentioned and we've discussed, do we have experience? Do we have applications in the past? People complained about it, the level of noise coming out of these hoists. I have seen few, they are very noisy. Personally, I know.
Yes, so the hoist mechanism structure is an internal lift, so wouldn't necessarily require permission itself, given that it's an internal alteration. But we could include, or we could strengthen condition 14 to the operational management strategy to include details of refuse and how that mechanism would work, and include the hoist in that if members felt that would cover the additional concerns raised by the residents.
I wanted to ask a question about the French doors, because we've talked a lot about operational concerns. We haven't really talked about the change in the appearance of the front of the building. And the objector did mention that there is nothing like that in that street. I mean, we know that. They all have the upper window with the panelling underneath. So I guess it would be helpful to just understand from you why you think that change is acceptable. And I do have a concern about these doors being open basically all day until 9 o'clock. I mean, that takes a lot of the action onto that outside terrace, if you want to call it that. I mean, I think it's pavement, actually, with a railing around it. That's quite different to what was going on before. So just, yeah, please tell us your comments and thinking on that.
So in terms of the French doors being appropriate within the street scene, is that the... Yes. Yeah. So officers have taken the view that the additional doors, because I think there are existing French doors or doors at the front elevation, that these doors that have shifted from one side to the other would be acceptable in this instance. We wouldn't be able to remove them from the application because we have to assess it as it has been submitted. So if members feel that the doors are harmful, we wouldn't be able to remove them from this application. But we've taken...
Do you have a picture of what they are currently? I think it's...
I can pull up...
It's probably best to describe what they looked like before. So they weren't sort of full-length doors. So, well, they're not doors, they're windows. So they're elongated, fixed windows, and then the main front door was kind of shifted to the side. So the intention is to drop the sill more than create a whole new opening there. That's how I'd describe it. But they are doors. They are doors to now could be opened and closed, not just windows.
At the moment they can't be opened. They're windows with a panel at the bottom.
I can check. I'm assuming they're fixed just from these images, and I'll double check on the existing
I think
drawing
it's important because it's a big change.
Yeah.
It's a big change to the streetscape, but I mean it really does impact on how the place will be used. Because I mean I do remember people sitting out there on that pavement. I don't really remember people coming in and out of the building.
No, they didn't come in and out from their windows because they have a fixed sill at the bottom.
Right.
But whether or not those actual panels could open, I'll check for you now.
Okay,
but they're not doors at the moment.
Okay.
Do you want to answer the second question?
Yeah.
Would you be able to repeat the second question again?
Yeah, so the second question is the kind of the change of use, I guess, of the front of that building from somewhere that people would come and sit and then go back into the doors now being open till 9 o'clock at night.
Yep.
And kind of, I mean, the whole building sort of coming out into the street, which is quite a big change, I think.
Yeah, I think we've taken, obviously our environmental health team have reviewed the submission, and there would be an increase in activity at that front of the pavement, but there are separate measures outside of planning should there be a noise and disturbance generated by the building, where residents can report to the environmental health team, and then they can action and respond to any complaints.
Okay, so I guess the next question would be about the operational plan. Obviously, there's concerns. This is something quite new for us. We don't have examples of this in the borough. So personally speaking, I think that would need to come back to committee when it's got more detail in it. Obviously, as a result of this meeting, more consultation. What are the mechanisms within the planning system to review that after 6 months, a year? Can that be called back to committee? Is that something we can review, or can we send it back to environmental health? How can we check what's happening, I guess, once it leaves this committee?
So we can strengthen the wording of the condition of the operational management plan and can section it off into bullet points to include sort of details of a means to review the operational strategy over a certain specific period of time, including sort of responding to residents' concerns. So that could be included to make the condition itself stronger. Members could, I think they can bring the condition back to committee after a certain time.
Yeah, it's probably, again, helpful if I jump in here because I've got the answer as well. So just looking at that existing floor plan, I'm sorry that wasn't included in your pack, but 6 of those windows have an opening leaf. So the windows can physically be open, but they are not doors, so you can't walk in through that window, according to the existing plans. With regard to the condition, you're absolutely within your gift to bring it back to committee if that's critical to you, and then you'll be able to, see what's been devised to overcome residents' concerns. And I agree with Gabby that strengthening condition 14 is a good idea based on everything that's been discussed. So breaking, rather than us, at the moment it focuses just on transport issues and has maybe, I think it's 3 items that it secures. We could widen that to have the noise ones, and members could decide if they were minded to grant permission to include things such as the rubbish, the compactor, the hoist, and the details of how that works. Details of the when and how the windows and doors would be opened. Capacity numbers, this is just things I picked up when we were discussing it, or you were discussing it. And then with regard to the review mechanism, if you like, that's how I'd describe it, I think it's probably best to actually put it in the applicant's court, so details of how you will respond and review to feedback from residents. And that gives them an opportunity to potentially set a date for a residents' meeting, do further consultation, or because designing it by committee now, I think will be more challenging. And we can agree the wording, the final wording. But I think it's probably best for them to present an option to you, so then you can consider whether that's acceptable or not, rather than...
So what do you think of Councillor Gardner's idea to bring it back after 6 months when it's fully operational? Does that work within the planning system?
The only problem I have is the trigger, Hazel. So if we had a pre-commencement condition, that prohibits them opening the business. So we'd just need to think carefully about how we get the...
I think the whole idea is to see how it's working, and then when it's fully functioning, what it looks like after 6 months.
So in that case, it may be best to have an operational management plan and then separate off some kind of review. If we just give me 1 minute just to confer with my legal colleague. I think, sorry, just thank you for giving us that minute. Officers would advise that it isn't necessarily a pre-commencement condition or one that has to come back to committee, in all honesty. That would be our advice to you, but it's within your gift, absolutely, to secure it to come back and to be pre-commencement. But I think it's definitely...
When you say pre-commencement, you mean for the operational plan?
Yes, so that you see that before it's that before it
And
starts.
what about the coming back after 6 months or a year?
That I would suggest we have it as the applicant, a bullet point that says the applicant to design a review mechanism that incorporates feedback from residents, and then when you're approving it, you'll be able to say, yes, I'm happy that they're considering this.
But could it be done within the planning system that we ask for it to come back after a year?
If they're committing to having
I'm
a
just
review,
trying to give the committee options.
Absolutely. If they're committing to having a review and it's drafted by them, they're signing up to working with the local community to have that part of the review. It's just really challenging to enforce. But there is a hook there in terms of enforceability and the tests for conditions, in that if we didn't see that review and that had been drafted in, then we could say, well, it's not actually complying with the management plan because we haven't seen that review.
I guess it puts the onus on residents rather than on us.
Yeah,
which makes us nervous.
Yeah, but I mean, that's assuming there is a problem resulting from it. So.
Oh, if there's no problem, then it'll be a very quick meeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Weed.
Just, we touched on with the applicants and the objectors some of the additional conditions, and you've talked again about a few of them here. In terms of, I think, transport, there's no issue with that coming back to committee. We can ask for that to come to committee. There's no issue there. Just following up on the chairman's line of questioning that that's A-OK planning-wise. Anyone? Yeah, so we can have that kind of, and then the opening hours, if we decided to make it 10 a.m. at weekends, as requested by objectors, that would also be something we're entitled to do.
The opening hours could be included in the operational management plan as well, and the applicant could confirm those, and then that could then come back to committee for members to check.
Councillor Mako.
There's something that we did discuss a bit, but haven't, unless I missed it, explored with officers in this section, which is permission personal to the applicant or the applicant's company.
The guidance is that personal permissions should only be in the most exceptional circumstances, and usually it's that the development wouldn't be acceptable unless it was carried out by that particular person. So it should usually run with the land, so we wouldn't advise putting a personal planning permission on, and also a condition limiting the permission to a company is not usually appropriate because the shares can be transferred to other people, so it's kind of meaningless.
Okay, so I think we need to start moving towards a decision, and possibly if we wanted to do something with the conditions, if we all minded to approve the application. So I think where we are is, if we all minded to approve this application, we would probably want the operational plan to come back to committee, and we can specify which elements of that. I mean, I think we've been reassured in some areas. The acoustic corridor, I think, sounds good. The retractable roof has been resolved, the overlooking, but there's still... I think if we're going to accept that an operator is going to push the boundary of what was happening before, then there has to be some mechanism for us to check what the impact is on residents. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is about the French doors, whether we feel comfortable with the change, because it is a change, and if we accept that French doors would be appropriate in that setting, given that it sounds like there were very, very tall windows previously, so I don't think visually it's going to change very much. Whether we're comfortable with those doors being open till 9 o'clock at night, potentially every day. So that's the second thing. The third thing
are we putting any time limits on the use of the French doors?
I think that's what we need to discuss and agree. I personally think every day till 9 o'clock is too much, certainly to start with. Thirdly, about the personal permission, whether we think there's anything on that, or whether we think conditions and the operational plan will be sufficient. And then, of course, there's the feedback mechanism, what we feel comfortable with. So are we happy with the advice given by officers that residents basically have to deal with it themselves, which is what it sounds like, or whether we want some review where it comes back to councillors, this committee, after 6 months or a year. So I think those are the four areas to talk about. So yeah, I mean, any views?
May I suggest to put a limit on the use on the French door, the upper limit, which is, in my view, 9 p.m. might be good, without putting limit on the morning.
I think the applicant's already saying 9 p.m. and saying, well, it wouldn't really be open that much. But, you know, the point is they would be capable of being open pretty much all the time. And that concerns me. I mean, I'm thinking of long summers, hot summers, doors open 7 days a week. I'm just saying, I think 9 p.m. every single day might be too much. That's my view, but you tell me what you think.
Sorry, if there were a condition on noise, surely that would mitigate some of the concerns around a French door being open.
And just to back that, because we heard that officers can add a condition saying no audible noise outside the premises, I think that there are examples in most wards where there are big glass doors which are sometimes open, where restaurants of quite large capacity can actually not have any noise come out, and that would be needed to comply with the condition saying no audible noise outside the premises. So it would just be no music and in effect no bad noise. So if that condition was going on, then it might mean, yes, you can have the doors open and it would just be very professionally managed to comply with that condition.
Okay.
I'd be comfortable with a slightly earlier time, at least on a Sunday. Okay. If we could go perhaps for 6 p.m. on a Sunday, given that's work night and day rest.
Okay. And then on the operational plan, is everyone feeling like that's something that should come back to committee when it's been worked through, particularly on transport, rubbish, opening hours, capacity? Anything else I missed here? Yeah.
Also at the weekends, if we could have a steer to a sort of a 10 a.m. start rather than, I mean, I don't really think anyone wakes up at 8 a.m. on a Saturday or Sunday. So I'm just conscious that obviously if it comes back to committee, you'll end up with a different lineup of different people who might have different views. So I think if we could at least put a steer in rather than a more laissez-faire come back to committee and
you think it should be 10 a.m. on a Sunday?
Is my personal view, yeah.
Any other views on that?
Just as we're on this operational plan, I'm not quite clear whether we're saying that the plan, which isn't set yet, needs to come back to committee as a pre-commencement first, and then secondly, after the club has been up and running for a period, maybe it's 6 months or maybe it's 12 months to allow for operational things to be worked through. We know there's going to be a quarterly meeting, I think it's in the plan somewhere, quarterly meeting with the residents so that there's going to be a very good feedback mechanism. It should be that after say 12 months, which will be an entire cycle of Christmas and summer and all the other things that go on, that any operational difficulties have been sort of worked out. But at that point, if there are significant difficulties, what is the way that it's almost like saying this plan should be reviewed after 1 year, potentially by environmental health. I think it's difficult for it to come back to planning committee after a year, but is there a review that environmental health could be required to make sure that all the things that have been targeted in that plan and made very specific are actually working? That gives environmental health plus residents and local councillors the requirement. That's my question.
Fiona.
I'm glad I got an opportunity because I've kind of drafted condition 14 to try and capture all these things. So what I think the edit should be with the bullet points would be opening and closing times, including reduced Sunday hours, details of a taxi and chauffeur service, dockless cycle hire. These are the things we've already asked for. details of a means to review the operational strategy over time, which enables the applicant to respond to resident concerns, in brackets, if any. Then details of a refuse strategy, details of the refuse management and hoist, details of opening hours, sorry, that's a duplicate, details of capacity, including patrons as expected covers and how bookings will be managed, because that might give flexibility with that opening time issue, if members were minded. Details of door management arrangements and how the premises will limit any noise outside the premises in order to adhere to condition. And then the new condition we normally have is no audible music outside, but if you wanted to change that to no noise outside, it then just gives you that comfort of how they're going to do that. And then with an informative confirming it needs to come back to committee prior to occupation. But I'll leave that with members.
Sorry, could I just ask about deliveries? Because I did mention it in my speech, but they didn't seem to have been picked up at all.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gardner. Deliveries, add that to the list. Any comments, thoughts? I mean, it sounds like we're comfortable with the French doors if we've got this condition of no audible noise outside. Is everybody happy for it to come back as a pre-commencement, come back to this committee and be referred back to environmental health after 12 months? Okay. So did you add deliveries to the...
Yeah, just details of deliveries to and from the premises. So that can capture everything. But the strategy over time, it's just, I really think it should be, rather than set a year, hopefully the applicant has heard you loud and clear and will commit to in 6 months, in 12 months. And if not, you can refuse the condition.
I feel like everything's going on for the residents to sort. You know, it leaves this committee. It's up to the residents then if there's a problem. I mean, I know there's obviously the licensing part of this, but I think everyone's concerned. So I think just having, look, I agree it doesn't have to come back here, but just a referral to environmental health, I think,
and I think
give us some, you know, it would give us some comfort that someone from the council is actually going to look at this, see if look, hopefully there won't be any problems at all, but you know, we've
I mean, I hope that the applicant is hearing these discussions and how serious the concerns are, and will, within that review strategy, talk about how they will do it. We will add, I mentioned right at the beginning, but probably it's got lost, that we will change the reason for the condition to capture noise as well, and then that's a trigger for officers not just to consult transport but environmental health as well, because I agree that's important.
Okay, committee, what's your feeling on that? Yes? Okay. And then can we also add the condition about the obscured glass for the plants room and the staircase for the residents that are worried about overlooking? And the blinds.
The blinds issue, happy to add it. Just a word of caution, it's difficult for officers to enforce, but if it's members resolve that, that's absolutely fine.
You know, there's a lot of glass in the bag, so, okay. Is everybody comfortable with what we've discussed and agreed? Okay, so I think we can move to a formal vote in that case. The recommendation is to approve the application at 45 Ledbury Road, subject to the strengthened conditions and operational management plan coming back to the planning committee. Can those in favour please show? Thank you, so that is approved. Thank you very much. Right, we will now move to number 17, Chepstow Crescent. Ms. Wesley, should we just give people a couple of minutes to exit? That's okay. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for waiting for those who are here for the next case. Ms. Wesley, please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to draw members' attention to the committee addendum report, which includes some minor amendments to the officer's report. This application seeks planning permission for the excavation of a single-storey basement, a replacement single-storey rear ground floor extension and associated first-floor terrace, and the installation of air source heat pumps. The application site is a 3-storey terrace property with a lower ground floor level, which is located on the western side of Chepstow Crescent. The site forms part of a wider terrace group of properties which are similar in terms of their character and appearance, with Pembridge Mews located immediately at the rear. This slide shows an aerial view of the rear of the terrace group. Members will note the existing rear extension at the ground floor level, which has been in situ for some time and is a historic development. Members will also note the rear projections and variations within the wider terrace group. This slide shows the existing photographs of the ground floor extension and first floor terrace, which would be replaced. The ground floor extension is connected to the host building by a sort of slim corridor link. This slide shows an existing section through the building. This slide shows the proposed section through the building and shows the depth of the basement. This slide shows the basement and replacement extension through another section of the building. The full suite of proposed section drawings is provided in the pack for members to see. This slide shows the proposed percentages within the rear garden, showing that the basement would meet 50% of all open areas within the site. Members may find this slide useful to refer back to. This slide shows the proposed rear elevation, which shows the alterations to the rear, including replacement windows and the new rear extension. This slide shows a visual of the proposed rear extension. The extension would be replaced with a structure of the same footprint, but with a slightly larger corridor link between the host building and the rear extension. This slide shows another visual of the proposed rear extension along with the basement, which members may find helpful. And this slide has been included to show the extent of the massing proposed and has been extracted from the daylight and sunlight assessment. Members will note that the massing is largely staying the same other than the corridor link, which is increasing in size. This application is recommended for approval for the reasons set out in the officer's report and subject to the recommended conditions. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I will ask the objector to please address the committee. The objector.
Thank you.
Okay. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, councillors. We at the Pembridge Association feel that this is a significant overdevelopment in the conservation area, which is unneighbourly and not in the best interests of conservation of this historic property. The significant increase in mass of the building, both above and below ground, of this already large home far outsides all of the neighbouring properties. The conversion en masse of what little remains of blue-green surface around the property, in the rear garden in particular, being replaced with yet more hard surfacing is of grave concern to us, given the known flood risk in the area, especially pertinent considerations at the time of this climate emergency. The current rear garden is currently subdivided into 3 portions, which have permeable surface. One of those will be lost in its entirety and a basement dug beneath it. The widening of the roof terrace, which will now directly adjoin a neighbouring property to an even greater extent, is also of concern to us. It presents a noise nuisance and it presents an overlooking nuisance. But most worrying of all is the extent of the proposed basement dig. It's over 4 metres in depth. It is on a street where neighbouring properties have already suffered subsidence, cracking and structural damage. There have already been instances of this. The excavation of this basement is flagrantly, we believe, against the council's own stated policy, extending all the way beneath the rear garden to abut the Mews house retaining wall behind it. This is a Frankenstein's monster which will stitch together these 2 terraces it was never intended to be this way. This was not the language of the conservation area. This was not the language that was intended to adjoin neighbouring properties. And it's a dangerous precedent which will have an effect on flood risk, will cause irreversible damage to the historical fabric of this terrace, and has little concern for the structural integrity of neighbouring properties. To quote the basement SPD directly, "It is preferable to keep the basement close to the building line and leave a margin that is free of development in each garden." This development does not do this. It extends all the way to the border wall with the Mews House behind it. To quote the SPD again, "The policy objective is to provide a significant space free of development to enable natural surface water drainage and planting. This should be considered. It's important in locating the basement that account is taken of leaving the unaffected portion of the garden connected to other unaffected neighbouring gardens," end quote. Again, this does not do this. It will separate gardens both east and west, and in the opposite direction, sorry, north, south, east and west. It will divide neighbouring gardens on each side. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you very much. I would now like to ask the agent to address the committee. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Councillors, good evening. I'm Luke Emerton from DP9, acting as the agent for the planning application. The presentation from your officers has been very clear, and the recommendation is very sound. Your officers have correctly made this assessment and concluded quite rightly that the proposals accord with all of the relevant policies within the development plan and should be granted planning permission. You will be aware of the history of the site, and some of you may have sat on this committee last year when the previous application for the property was refused. As has been explained by your officers in the report, this application has taken a very forensic approach to addressing every relevant part, every limb of policy CD11 of the local plan alongside the basement SPD guidance. This results in a scheme before you that couldn't be more compliant. It should be one of the more straightforward decisions this committee has to take this evening. However, as you've heard, there remains isolated local opposition for the proposed development, which is not unusual in the borough. It's very important for members to understand that the applicant is engaged with the immediate neighbours, the ward councillors and the Pembridge Association in developing this revised scheme to ensure that every element of the scheme is understood by neighbours and every issue addressed where this is practical and feasible. Members will note from the report pack that the majority of the comments received are readily addressed through standard planning conditions, as is the norm within the borough. I would like to pick up on a few of the comments just made by the Pembridge Association, because there are inaccuracies that the members need to be very aware of. This is not overdevelopment in a conservation area, as your officers have just been very clear. The building is above ground. The building is no larger, no bigger than is existing, with the exception of the corridor that links the existing extension to the rear. The policy, your basement policy, 50% of the garden, 50% of the development, is fully complied with. In fact, the existing garden is a hard-surfaced garden at the rear. It's a rear courtyard, non-permeable surfaces. This scheme brings forward 50% of that as planted, garden, permeable surfaces in full compliance with your policy. There is also a SUDS strategy with an attenuation tank to deal with surface water. The extension in the basement is not 4 metres. It is compliant with your policy. It's 3.5 metres. And every element of the scheme is compliant with the policy, and therefore we very much urge members to follow the officer's recommendation and to support the application this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will start with questions to the objector and to the applicant. I have a first question, please, which is this application was at committee and there was clear direction given about areas to think about. Can you just summarise for the committee what the main reasons for refusal last time were and what you've done to address those concerns?
Hello there. My name's David Archer and I'm the architect. When we came to committee last February, the refusal was on 3 over three matters, I believe. One was overdevelopment. In response to that, the scheme has been dropped by 2 feet, 60 centimetres, and so that it aligns exactly with the height of the existing building. A second overdevelopment point was the inclusion of a roof light over the courtyard, and that has been removed and the courtyard is open. Previously, we had sought to extend the lower ground floor out into the rear courtyard as a continual development. That has been completely dropped, and the courtyard remains as it exists at the moment and is excavated further. Last time we were also refused on the basis that it needed to be a basement development and not an extension in the lower ground floor, and this has been brought forward as a basement extension following pre-application advice and consultation with the planning officers. I think those are most of the areas. In the development of the scheme, the revised scheme, we've done that in close collaboration with the neighbours. We've agreed very minor amendments to the party wall condition with the neighbours. These are covered in condition, which have been discussed with the officer, including the retention of the small kind of fascia that stops overlooking and providing a well-detailed parapet with an agreed detail in order to stop water running down the outside face of the party wall into the adjoining garden. That's that answer.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Any other questions? Councillor Bakhtiar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the objectors sent in their objection say 100% of the way into the rear garden is included in this development. So we know that our policy is clear. Council's policy is allowing 50% of the garden size. So if you add, this could be tricky, how the way you interpret it. What percentage you are developing in the garden?
Shall I? Your officer brought up a plan earlier, and it might just be very helpful for that plan, Councillor, to be put back up on the screen, because we've been very careful and very forensic, as I said earlier, in terms of making sure that we are fully compliant. We know the policy, we know the requirements, and the scheme meets the policy requirements. You will see the image on the left-hand side on your screen is the existing condition, which shows the rear garden, the rear courtyard in grey at the top left, which is a hard surfaced area. On the right-hand side, there are two parts to the garden. There's the rear courtyard and there's this kind of internal courtyard. And in both cases, there is no excavation beyond, no extension of the area beyond the 50% policy requirement. There is no reference to 100% dig. It is a 50% position as a maximum, as per your policy.
As it was me that made that claim, could I elaborate that we refer to 100% of the length between the end of the property and the end of the adjacent property, which in the SPD is clearly made. There should be a margin between those two, between the Mews house at the rear and between the extent of this terrace. That was the 100% to which we refer. On the top right there, you'll see that despite being 50% of the area, it does extend all of the way across and would divide gardens of the adjacent terrace in two.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll now move to questions to officers. Are there any questions? Councillor Winsan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just on that basement point, I'm not sure if it's just me not being able to get my head around the drawings, but it does seem like the basement goes out right to the end of that point. And as has been raised by the objector and by Councillor Bakhtiar, my understanding was that it couldn't go under more than 50%. So could you just clarify that for us?
Yes, so I've brought the plan back up on the screen. It is a very unusual site. So the building as existing has a large overall footprint, and as part of the basements policy, we do allow excavation underneath the entire footprint of the building. So in this particular case, we would permit an excavation of a single story beneath the lower ground floor level of this building, including the corridor link and including the rear extension, because that's already existing. And then as part of the basements policy, we allow up to 50% of each open area of the site. So this site is really unusual in the sense that it's got two open areas, so two courtyards. So in this particular case, the basement policy would permit excavation underneath 50% of each of those courtyards. So we would permit that in addition to the excavation underneath the footprint. And it's just in this specific site case that it is already quite a large building, and it has a large footprint by virtue of the historical rear extension that's been there for quite some time. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you very much. And what would your response be to the objectors who say that it's not compliant with the bit about the SPD, about the border wall and that bit rather than the 50%?
So officers have taken the view when reviewing the policy in accordance with the SPD that it does meet sort of the open areas of the site, and it is within that 50% threshold because we've taken each courtyard as an open area, which is set out in the SPD, that it's an open area of the site.
Councillor Svedenic.
Sorry if this has already been answered, but can you just confirm that the building is, as the applicant said, no larger than the existing size with the exception of that corridor?
Yes, so that is the existing building, and that is the overall size of it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So, Councillor Mackover.
It's not a question, just a comment in case it helps people. I was on the committee, to my recollection, a year and some time ago, and this was refused. And to my recollection, all of the points that it was refused for have been correctly addressed. So the officer's report has got it right. But it is true, as officer said, this is a difficult site to envisage if you haven't had a chance to think about it quite a few times. But I thought I'd just add that as a helpful comment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mackover. That's really helpful. I mean, I think we've heard that a lot of work has gone on since this was last at committee. It is an unusual site. If you were building it today, you probably wouldn't build it like that, but, you know, we're here to deal with what's actually in existence. So, in my mind, I think a lot of work's been done, and I think it's fully compliant with all of our policies. So I think we can probably move to a vote. So the recommendation is to approve the application at 17 Chepstow Crescent. Can those in favour please show? And can those against please show? So that's 4 in favour. So the application is approved. If everyone's okay, shall we move on, or does anybody want a break? Are you okay? 2 minute break. 2 minute break. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're going to start again, and we're going to move to the application at 42 Tregunta Road. And Ms. Peck, could you please take us through the presentation if you're ready?
Okay, this is the application at 42 Tregunta Road. So we have a site location plan here, and I just want to highlight some of the residential properties that you might be hearing about from the objections. So to the left of this slide, we have properties 51 to 57 bound the red line on the left, Redcliffe Gardens. And then to the north, you can see number 2, and the building just below that is called Cliff Cottage on Redcliffe Mews. The application follows on from planning permission that was granted in 2013 for a large basement extension to the rear garden. In 2022, there was a certificate application to reconfigure 2 flats in the building. And in 2024, there was permission for a basement extension to the front garden. Sorry, we're just going to share this task. So the aerial view you have there, again, it's the same as the location plan. So the properties to the left are Redcliffe Gardens. The application site is the red arrow. And then just to the north of the image on the left, you can see Redcliffe Mews with Cliff Cottage, which is just by the trees to the rear. And then a zoomed in aerial view on the right-hand side. And then this is just an aerial view looking, so you can see the application site with the red arrow, and you can see the existing 2-storey extension, which is on the boundary close to Redcliffe Gardens properties. And again, on the image on the right-hand side here, you can see Cliff Cottage just at the bottom of this image. Here we have the existing and proposed rear elevation. So on the left is the existing, with an existing 2-storey extension and a side extension that you can just see. And on the right, what we can see is the proposed lower ground floor extension with a roof terrace and an external staircase. And then to the right of that, you can see the extension to the existing 2-storey extension. So it becomes a wider extension, and it has an additional storey on the top. And then the next slide, that's the existing and proposed side elevation. So what you can see there again is the existing extension in the foreground. The image on the right is the proposed extensions, and you can see the red dotted line is just showing a comparison with the existing extension there. What this also shows you is that at the moment on the side there is an existing top floor terrace, and with this proposal that terrace is removed from the scheme. Then this is the existing and proposed lower ground floor. So what you can see at the top is the existing, and then the bottom shows you the location of the proposed garden room, and it has an internal spiral staircase because that connects down into the basement that was approved back in 2013. Again, what you can see on here is you can see the lower ground floor extension, so it effectively becomes a full width extension, and you can see the external staircase that provides access to the roof of that extension. And then this slide is the first floor, so again you can see the proposed garden room, and then you can see the proposed extensions to the rear and the side. On there, nothing really on the next one, please. And then here we have the proposed section, and what this shows, the basement level is what's already got approval in 2013. So the elements that are subject of this application are the garden room that you can see, which is a maximum of 3 metres in height, and you can also see the external staircase and the roof of the extension, the lower ground floor extension there. And then the final slide is just some slides showing the proposed elevations for the garden room. So the image on the left is the front and the rear elevation, and then the image on the right are the side elevations. So the application is recommended for approval for the reasons set out in the report and subject to conditions listed in the report as well.
Thank you very much. So we will now call on the objectors to address the committee. Where are you? So you have 3 minutes.
Right. Hello, I'm Michael Chicken. I'm a director of the company that owns the freehold of most of Redcliffe Mews, and I own the long leasehold of Cliff Cottage, which sits sideways onto the rear of the Tregunter Road Gardens. The plans just shown to you are actually inaccurate. They do not reflect how far back the Cliff Cottage garden goes. Nevertheless, one, as I cannot sleep when these gardens, generally in Tregunter Road near me, are used at night, there should be a condition that there should be no use after midnight. 2, the fire report is 4 years out of date and refers to Kingspan, heavily criticised in the recent Grenfell report. You should impose a condition that requires a new fire report stating that no fire from the main building can spread via the new basement through the new exits to the unprotected garden fences, conservatories, etc. nearby. 3, fans from these garden basements at the front of my property also prevent my sleep at times. Please impose a condition requiring no fans are placed at the rear end of this basement near my property. Thank you.
If I may continue. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Phil Heaton, I'm speaking on behalf of 40 Tregunter Road, the leasehold apartments and the freehold at 53 Tregunter. Thank you. There are two main elements I want to bring to attention. One is the roof terrace itself, the infill terrace. The infill terrace takes away sunlight and daylight from the lower ground floor and ground floor of number 40 Tregunter Road. Ordinarily, you would take a 45-degree line from the centre of the window closest to the party wall. If you were to do that, you would have less than 2 metres of permitted extension. Number 2, the BRE sunlight study that has been produced with the application doesn't satisfy the requirements of the pre-application. The pre-application recommendations were for a daylight study as well, and that has not been carried out. Now, the sunlight study that has been produced appears to follow the axis of a northeast to southwest axis rather than east-west, which as some follows, which is the axis of Tregunter Road itself. And the reason that is apparent is because on Redcliffe Gardens, where the two breaks in the properties appear against the boundary of number 42, Tregunter Road, is the lines are parallel. The sunlight lines are parallel, as if the light was exactly in that axis, which it isn't, because they've moved the axis on the sunlight. So what we have is not an actual BRE sunlight study. Nevertheless, we still require a BRE daylight study in order to inform the development. Were that to happen, that will provide a limiting envelope around the existing building with the proposals, and it would show that it would either conform or not conform to the guidelines of the building research establishment. So in summary, we're looking to relocate also the steps away from the bay window, which are shown, if it's possible to get the drawing back up again on the elevation back on again. I don't know whether I'm careful of time. So.
Your 3 minutes are up, but I'm sure there'll be some questions.
Okay,
so thank you.
Well, if you ask appropriate questions, I'll help you.
It's helpful to have that plan up. Yeah, thank you. Let's move on to the applicants to address the committee. So you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors and officers for giving your time tonight. To ensure we did submit a valid and considered planning application that met the council's relevant policies, we chose to first submit the pre-app as discussed, which included an on-site meeting with our case officer to evaluate the site and its potential constraints. This enabled us to clearly develop the submission scheme that would amicably fall within the council's local plan and the key policy headings, mainly conservation area, general townscape, living conditions, fire safety and flooding. We note that this particular application for improving number 42 has generated a number of objections to bring it to committee, of which a handful are of relevance and have been summarised and addressed within the officer's report. Within the report, the two decisive issues relating to any relevant objections have been clearly questioned and addressed, and we would further summarise these as follows. Point 1, whether the proposal would preserve or take opportunities to enhance the character and appearance of the group of buildings and the Bolton's conservation area. And point 2, whether the proposal would ensure that good living conditions continue for neighbouring occupants. Number 42 has been a building site or part derelict and decaying for a number of years now. Our engagement last year is from new owners wanting very much to improve and enhance number 42 and in turn preserve the character and appearance of the group of buildings within the Bolton's conservation area. It is always sad to see top properties hoarded up and left to decay, and since our client's acquisition last year, we have worked quickly as a team to ensure that it will be restored and enhanced to meet current living standards. The client now has a team on site completing any previously approved historic works which were not fully realised by previous owners. Their wishes and aims is to move seamlessly onto realising the fresh submissions we have made on their behalf. Without further pauses in construction, we are confident that good living conditions can be returned for neighbouring occupants, when this has probably not been the case over the last 10 plus years while the building has sat abandoned and unsightly. Privacy and overlooking will also be greatly improved with this planning proposal by removing the two high-level existing roof terraces from the side and rear extensions. The trellis against the boundary with number 20 for the proposed terrace at ground floor level is a planning condition that we will ensure is designed to be agreeable to all. And the steps from the rear ground floor terrace to the garden will be very similar to those that already exist at most of the properties on the street, including number 20. We are aware and in agreement of the 10 planning conditions that would be attached to this permission if successful this evening. We will strive to ensure all works are now completed in a timely manner and immediate neighbours are kept up to date with the programme. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, questions to the applicant and the objectors. Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question to the objectors. Did I understand you well that your major concern is proximity and this is affecting privacy? The new development is too close to the neighboring buildings and it's affecting privacy. Could you, or do you have other concerns? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The concerns are driven by the BRE guidelines for daylight and sunlight. And as I say, from the centre line of a window that is closest to that property, you would normally strike a 45-degree line. And your limit of your projection of an extension from the rear wall would not normally breach that 45-degree line. Now, there are other occasions where it can be breached, but then we would need a full BRE daylight and sunlight study carried out, and we don't have that. Yet it was a requirement and a recommendation of the pre-application. So that is a concern that wasn't done.
Other questions? Okay, so we'll move to questions from to officers. Councillor Macko.
Thank you. There seems to be a lot of different schemes implemented at different times, all now seeming to take place at the same time. In case I missed it, I don't know whether officers have considered an overall CTMP to cover all of the combined cumulative work, because this does seem to be close to a corner and lots of deliveries and collections and materials and excavations and other sorts of building going on. And also on condition 9, the site construction management plan, that's the sort of place where rather than just this one isolated proposal, if it gets consented, being considered, it should take into account the other works taking place on site, otherwise the documents will be not helpful.
Yep. As I understand it, we have the Code of Construction Practice condition on here, and I believe we've assessed the applications on the basis of all the applications and all the schemes at the building, and I believe our environmental health colleagues would also do the same. So if the Code of Construction practice document, if they were implementing 2 or 3 permissions, they would have to cover all those permissions in that submission. Yeah. Yeah, and we can also add a CTMP condition.
That would cover all of the works and not just the works in this application.
We could add a bullet point on there to make that clear.
I think that would be very helpful because there is a lot going on this site. It's a big site. And, you know, this has been going on since 2013, so I think it's an opportunity to re-look at how the work's going to be done, especially given that our CTMPs have become much tighter in the last 10 years. And then there's also the question about the fire strategy, which I know is something that we've strengthened after the last local plan that we adopted last year. So I just wondered whether that was also something that could be included, given that there is other work going on this site.
Yep, I mean, we have a fire strategy submitted, so I'm just looking at Fiona.
Does it cover everything?
I think it would be a pre-commencement condition, so we can get it agreed by the agent beforehand, but an updated one, noting the concerns with some of the people that were included within that report. I don't think that would be unreasonable, just to seek clarification. Okay. If there's anything in particular you want officers to... We wouldn't want to name any particular companies or anything, but if there's anything in particular missing, you can let us know. If not, it could just be an updated one because it's 4 years old.
Updated because it feels like it's probably 10 years old.
Yeah, so
and things have moved on.
I think the speaker did mention 4 years, but still, it wouldn't be unreasonable to have that condition, and we could add it.
I think it should be looked at. I mean, it's a big site, so I think I don't think it's unreasonable, and it's got new owners, so I think it's good for them to be engaged with the whole project. On the point about the daylight sunlight and the lack of daylight, could you just talk to us about the concerns that have been raised by the objector?
Yep, I'll just get the location plan.
And it's helpful to see which windows we're talking about as well, I think.
Thanks. So this is the location plan, and this is North Point is to the north. So the extension is located just, there's a little projection on the application site where the existing 2-storey extension is. And the proposed extension is a storey on top of that, and then the extension is being made full width at lower ground floor and slightly wider at upper ground and first floor. So, as I understand it, the concerns are with regard to the rear windows of number 42, which is the property that's directly adjoining the application site, and the rear windows of the properties on Redcliffe Gardens. So it's 53, 55 and 57, I think mainly 53. So what the objector is talking about is at our pre-application letter, we did ask for a BRE daylight sunlight report to assess the impact. And there are 2 levels of tests. You can do the 45-degree test in elevation and in plan, and then if both of those are failed, then you get a daylight sunlight assessment. What the applicant has submitted is a shadowing study, which shows that the sun obviously rises in the east and comes round sort of under the application site and then sets in the west. So they're showing that the main building is larger than the extension and is blocking any impact of the sunlight using that sun progression round. So as you can see, it would come up just before number 42 on that side, go round to Redcliffe Gardens side. So that is what the applicant has submitted, and we've assessed it on that basis. And in the context of the building being larger and being, if you're looking from the Redcliffe Gardens properties, that's the context of the extension sitting in front of that extension. And then in the context of number 40, looking out from the rear windows, the extension would be on the left. And we believe in the assessment that there's no impact on daylight sunlight or overlooking and sense of enclosure to warrant refusal of the application.
Okay. And then there was also a conversation about the steps on the terrace, and there's now a trellis, I think, which is going to provide some privacy. So can you show us an image of that?
Yep, so it's the image on the right-hand side, so you can see the steps are sort of in the middle of that property there, in the middle of the right-hand side elevation, going up to the... It's actually, so the extension's at lower ground floor level, so the steps are going up to the upper ground floor level, and then the terrace is around the bay window, and the trellis is in between the two properties, in between number 40 and number 42.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Svidenek.
Sorry. So the garden room is quite different and unusual, and given it's a conservation area, I wonder if you could explain how you think that this is in keeping with the character of the neighbourhood. Thank you.
Yep, so the assessment's been made on the basis that it's a timber-clad building, and it's set away from all the boundaries, the rear and the side boundaries, and it's a single-storey, 3-metre-high building with a green roof as well. So in terms of the context of what an outbuilding would be, we would expect to see a timber building, albeit this is a modern design. But given the context of the relatively large-sized garden and further along the terrace, Tregunta Terrace, the properties have garages at the end, quite large garages that back onto then Redcliffe Mews. So in that context, a flat-roofed single-storey building fits in with the context, and the timber cladding is something that we'd expect and we think is sympathetic to the conservation area.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm afraid to use the M word, modern, which is a bit of a red rag to a bull for some of us. Just on the question of, I guess, looking at the aerial views, there look like there are a number of trees at the back there, and I'm just wondering, are any trees going to be harmed in the production of this development?
Yes, so as I understand it, the 2013 permission for the basement gave permission for the removal of trees, and there are conditions requiring 3 trees along the boundary just to the rear. So the replacement trees are shown on the drawings with reference to that consent and that requirement.
So trees will go, but will come back as part of the overall plan.
Yep.
And then just a follow-up, I guess, on design. If we were to feel that timber cladding is not perhaps appropriate in a conservation area, what sort of conditions are there? You know, could it be conditioned that it sort of be whitewashed or stucco, or what sort of wiggle room do we have to try and find something that perhaps might be more appropriate?
You could condition the details to be submitted, and then we could do an informative to advise what your preference would be.
I think it's difficult because the design presented in front of you is modern. If we start tinkering with the materials, I don't think it's going to have the desired effect of a more traditional result. I think it would just look like maybe a bit of a mishmash. So I think if you've got concerns with the outbuilding design, they should be concerned. But just I would comfort you in that it's set off the boundary, constructed of timber, reads as an ancillary garden structure to me. But that is a matter of planning judgment and opinion. But I don't think materials condition will do it. I think it would just have to be you're not satisfied with the design, in all honesty.
So we think we couldn't change the material if we did what was it, Mrs. If we did that, if we went down that route with an informative that we wanted something more, say what you'd consider traditional, or perhaps in some people's opinion kitsch, that you think that wouldn't be possible to come back as something that.
I think we're just going a bit too far in terms, because this is the design they've come up with and put in front of you. If you want a different design, unfortunately, it would be a recommendation to refuse and say this is not in keeping and is unacceptable and harms the character.
But I guess it's mainly about the material, right? It's not necessarily the size or bulk.
It's
Oh,
more
yeah,
that-
no, absolutely. So the refusal reason could just refer to design and materiality and not discuss height or bulk or scale. We can just specify the main problem. But I think it's really difficult to say, notwithstanding a new design needs to come back. I think that's going to be really challenging as a condition, and I'm not sure entirely legal. Yeah, sorry.
Councillor Bakhtiar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Coming back to the main concern of the objectors is daylight report. You did explain that comparing the size of the current building and with the new developed new extension. So is this normally how you assess things, or is it a legal requirement to have a daylight report?
There's no legal requirement for a daylight and sunlight report. So a lot of authorities will apply a 45-degree line, a 25-degree line. There's lots of different tests you can do. In the Royal Borough, we have a policy relating to living conditions that talks about not being harmful to daylight, sunlight, sense of enclosure, etc. So our officers, we don't have a test or a basis. We look at each case on its merits. And we do sometimes apply using different rules or our own planning judgment. Here, it's the context and the orientation that means that we've come to the conclusion that the loss of daylight and sunlight wouldn't be so harmful as to justify a refusal. So that doesn't mean that there will be no change to outlook, no change to daylight and sunlight received. It's just it wouldn't be so harmful that we would want to refuse planning permission on it because of that context, that orientation in the buildings that are surrounding it. The distances and all of those things. So that's been reviewed by officers, and I'm also comfortable with that arrangement at the back there, given the size of the properties and everything else. But it is a planning judgment, so there can be a different conclusion reached.
Okay, any other questions? So we'll start to move towards a decision on this. I was concerned also about the daylight sunlight, but these are quite big spaces. It's big gardens, big houses. So I feel satisfied with that assessment about it not being a reason to refuse the application. And then I really did think about this terrace and the staircase, and obviously we can't start changing the position of the staircase, but in my mind, it wouldn't make a huge difference anyway if the staircase was moved. And the key thing is the trellis and the privacy. The houses are obviously next door to each other, so I think there would be some overlooking anyway. And I don't feel that the terrace or the stairs really impacts on that, and I think the trellis helps. So in my mind, I think with the addition of the updated CTMP, which is to modern today's standards, and the fire strategy, I feel quite satisfied with this. So if there are no more questions, I think we can move to a vote. The recommendation is to approve the application at 42 Tregunta Road. Can those in favour please show? And can those against please show? So that's 3-2 approved. Thank you very much. So we're going to move swiftly on to 24 Pembridge Square. And thank you for waiting. I know it's been a long evening. Ms. Wesley, are you ready to make your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to draw members' attention to the committee addendum report, which includes further information setting out the existing floor spaces of the units within the building, measured against the minimum space standards. The table sets out which of the flats currently meet the standards and which ones do not. Information on the extant consent has also been included for members to see, which include approved amalgamations of studios with storage areas in the building in 2023. I'd also like to verbally update members to clarify paragraphs 1.6 and 6.44 of the officer's report, which state that no acoustic report was submitted with the application. As a clarification, an acoustic report was submitted, however, our environmental health team reviewed information and deemed it to be inadequate. This application seeks both planning and listed building consent for the amalgamation of 23 existing flats and 2 bedsits to create 7 self-contained flats, along with the demolition of the existing rear extension and its replacement, along with associated internal alterations and external plant. The proposals would result in the loss of 17 residential homes at the site, and so is recommended for refusal, along with the other reasons set out in the officer's report. The site is located along Pembridge Square and is a large 3-storey detached building. The building is currently split into flats and is comprised of 23 self-contained studio flats, 2 bedsit units and 3 storage rooms. The building is Grade 2 listed and is within the Pembridge Conservation Area. This slide shows an aerial view of the site and shows the external rear additions within the wider terrace group. This slide shows the existing rear outrigger at the rear elevation of the building, along with its current visibility, which can be seen along Chepstow Place. This slide shows a typical existing floor plan in the building. The full set of existing floor plans are within the committee pack for members to see. This slide shows the proposed lower ground and ground floor plans, along with external amenity spaces to the rear. And this slide shows the proposed studio flats, which would be located within the mansard roof, and these are the 2 that are currently proposed to be undersized. And this slide shows the existing and proposed massing. Members will note the replacement extension and the demolition of the existing outrigger on the left-hand side, and then the proposed replacement extension on the right-hand side, with an associated terrace area. The planning application is recommended for refusal on 5 reasons, and the listed building consent is also recommended for refusal for 2 reasons. The full reasons are set out in detail within the officer's report, and that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to invite the applicant to address the committee. You have 3 minutes, and please do introduce yourself before you start.
Thank you. My name's Maxon. I work for Lefroy. I'm the project manager, and we are representing the applicant. I'm here with Lucia, our development director, and Kate Matthews, our planning consultant. We've been working on the designs for this building for nearly 3 years now, exploring many iterations of the design, from a 5-unit scheme favouring heritage considerations to a larger scheme submitted at pre-app in 2023. Each time we're testing these plans not only against planning policy and heritage considerations, but with community groups such as the Pembridge Association, with building control, and constantly vetting the viability. Through this process, we've garnered a confidence that the application brought forward is the correct one for this building. We, of course, acknowledge there are loss of units. 5 of these units in the existing context are well undersized, between 15 and 17 metres squared, and only 2 units across the project adhere to space standards. The 2 units that are referenced on the top floor, which are slightly undersized, as highlighted by the case officer, we'd like to reinforce that these are existing units that we have enlarged to be better aligned with space standards. The smallest unit is 28 metres squared and has important amenity space at 3.2 metres squared. These units are crucial to balance the mix of proposed accommodation while also offering a lower hurdle of affordability to the larger units below. We further acknowledge that some of the units are oversized, but again, within the realms of an existing building where layouts are informed by physical conditions, bedrooms need to be placed by windows for daylight and ventilation. Squeezing additional units into these floors would compromise the spatial qualities, introduce additional circulation, and be harmful to the heritage of the building. Regretfully, if you were to be transported into 24 Pembridge Square now, there'll be little consciousness or recognition of a listed building. The space is a labyrinth of undersized units, modern interventions, which have been shrouded the architectural language of the building. There is a 1960s extension that's been latched onto the rear elevation and is wholly unsympathetic with the host house and a real eyesore in the vernacular of the architecture. It's important that we begin to unpick the layers of these modern interventions and rediscover the identity of the listed building as it was intended to be. We need to reinstate fireplaces, remove suspended ceilings, carefully restore cornicing and architectural features to bring prosperity back to the building's heritage. The two-storey extension proposed will replace the 1960s five-storey addition, and these have been carefully designed to respond to the main dwelling through its architectural language. The infill extensions, again illustrated in great detail within the design and access statement, are conscious interventions which widen the symmetry of the whole terrace and reflect what's happened at number 25. The Council have further raised a few conditions on technicalities pertaining to acoustics and heat gain. We would welcome further conditionality to mitigate these concerns.
Thank you. That is 3 minutes. Thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be questions. Okay. Who'd like to start with the questions? Anyone? No questions? Okay, I'll start with the question then. So I guess the kind of big concern here is really the loss of the units. And, you know, I did have a look at what's actually there and noticed that the vast majority of the units are not compliant with modern standards. So I think everybody, well, I would agree that the building, you know, it's a good thing that you're finding a way to bring the building back into use, into habitable use, and I think all of that is really welcomed. But I think the difficulty is going from 27 to 7, and for me that might even be acceptable if all of those 7 were within modern were compliant with modern standards, and 2 of them, of course, are not. So I guess it would be helpful for us to understand how you've got to the scheme that you've brought here tonight, why those 2 units. I understand the whole thing about affordability, but I think it would have been more helpful to bring something that was fully up to modern standards rather than have 2 units that don't comply. But I think what we'd like to hear from you is why you think that's the optimal way of using the space.
Hi, my name is Lucia Petrelli, and I'm representing Lefroy, the applicant. So we tested different options through the year, going from 3, 5, 7, and above. So we tested different layouts, and we believe that the option that we have presented here is actually the only one that can work for the building in its shape. As Maxen already mentioned, even if we wanted to introduce more unit in one floor plate, we would end up with bedrooms with no natural light or with very narrow windows. So we decided to go for the first and second floor as floor plates and accommodate 2 bedrooms with a large living space. And in terms of the split over the 2 duplexes, we know that the lower ground floor flats are not probably the most appealing because of the least amount of light, and that's why we combine them with ground and lower ground. In addition, also, we didn't want to add any internal stairs, so the additional stairs to 1 duplex is in the additional rear extension, so we're not touching the fabric of the existing building, while for the other duplex we are utilizing the existing stairs. So we are very sympathetic to the heritage aspect. And for what regards the top floor flats, we thought that, you know, to keep the existing flats but enlarge them as much as we could. So we have worked with the existing fabric and the restrictions, and we thought that the 7-unit scheme was actually the only one that worked for us, and also with the floor plates we have. also we have a scheme that at the moment works. So we could, potentially develop the 25 units as it is. We could keep the rear extension from the 60, which is not, of course, particularly appealing to anyone, but we would really offer undersized units, and we think that what we have offered here is a much better scheme than what we have right now.
I mean, I don't think anybody's really suggesting that you keep 25 units, because, I mean, they wouldn't be up to modern day standards. In terms of the two that are not space compliant, where are those units? I think they're at the top, right?
Yeah, they're at the top floor. I think it's also worth mentioning that as Lefroy, we've maybe delivered 100 units last year, many of which weren't necessarily meeting space standards, but we have absolute confidence that with the right design solutions, the right storage solutions, the right kitchen solutions, that these will be fit for purpose and they'll be very attractive to a particular demographic. And I think we've proven that in the last year. So we're very comfortable with the sizing. And importantly, as Lucia mentioned, additional units on the other floor plates introduce additional circulation space, it's more partitioning, and it becomes further separated from this notion of trying to bring the building back to how it ought to be.
Sorry, finally, if I could just add, I think the real restriction is the fact that this is a listed building and we are trying to take a heritage approach, and not the top floor of the building would always have been quite heavily subdivided, so it's difficult to, on heritage grounds, remove a lot of those partitions on the top floor. And therefore, our only other option would be, instead of having the 3 units on the top floor, to have 2. But then we end up with a 6-unit scheme, and we thought it was important to keep some studios rather than, large 1-beds. So obviously, if this was a new build, it wouldn't really be acceptable to come along with units that are 28 square metres. But I think the fact is we're trying to work with an existing building that is listed and keep some studios whilst creating some family housing and get a better mix throughout the building. It has been our main aim.
Councillor Svidenik.
Can you tell me the difference in the number of bedrooms from as it currently stands to the, what is it, we've gone from 27 flats to 7? Because I don't in principle disagree with more family housing. So what about the number of bedrooms?
So I think, we have currently all studio flats. So they are all 25 rooms, and we are proposing 2 3-beds, 2 2-beds, and 3 1-beds. So in terms of rooms, 13. However, of these 25, 5 are undersized, are around 15 square meters flats.
Plus, a lot of these are doubles.
Sorry, so about 14 fewer beds. So it's just less stark than 27 compared to 7. If you think about it that way, I think.
However, they are studio flats, so they are not separate bedrooms, so people at the moment sleep and cook in the same space. What we are providing instead in the top floor flats, we are separating bedrooms and kitchenettes, so the living condition is definitely better than what it's currently. And also, at the rear extension of the 60s, we have 5 flats that are like 12 square meters. They are really, really poor condition. People are living there now in basically shoe boxes. So, of course, we are reducing the number, but because the number at the moment is wrong. However, it can be, it is what it is.
Sorry, could I just add, I think you also need to look at the person capacity of each flat, which is set out in the space standards. So there's a lot more double bedrooms, whereas all the studios would currently count as single rooms. So if you look at the person capacity, I think that equates to 23, which is obviously a lot closer than the 25.
Thank you. I was just curious when you said you've explored many iterations over the years, and that means fewer, more single house, etc. I'm aware of a few of the other subdivided houses in the same area with the same footprint. In fact, slightly less because you have a chance of a bit of an extension at the back under this proposal. But they have, a number of those other houses have fitted in not a large number, but a few more units. And one of the things, I don't know whether you'd explored with officers in pre-app, or whether all the other schemes that you were looking at over the as you quote, many iterations over the years, whether you'd looked at other houses in the square and seen how they were able to subdivide but still keep good room sizes and some of the features like fireplaces or other things that are in there.
Yes, we have looked at other examples, and we started definitely with one big house scheme, and then we went up to 3. So we actually increased the numbers as we tested it. But in our mind, it was always the split between the lower ground floor and ground floor should have been a duplex. So we believe that it's the best way to split these 2 floors rather than across. Instead, has been done in other neighbors' houses. And then we wanted to keep the first and second floor flats as full floor plates to reinstore, the existing form of the plan. So we have looked at examples, and we have come about with the 7 unit scheme. We thought it was the right.
Yeah, I think just to add, we practically have to constantly sense check what we're doing with the viability of the projects, and the longer we've had the projects, the more we've uncovered, the more we've discovered. Restoration of a building like this is a labour of love. It's a drawn-out process. We need to carefully restore windows, architraves, cornicing. All of this comes at a significant expense. So being candid with you, less units does introduce more value into the property and gives us more options in really investing back into this property, which we feel is incredibly important.
Thank you. And just from my understanding, when you're looking at that viability or payback for your investment, are these thought of as long-term rental units or short-term rental units, or sale into private ownership, splitting the building up?
This would be long-term rental, most likely.
Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Questions for officers? Councillor Whedon-Sands.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Overall, I agree with the position that you said earlier. I'm pretty relaxed about the idea of amalgamations, improving what we have. I wish it were done across the whole borough. And I guess what I'd like to hear from officers is 2 of the reasons, mainly for the listed building consent to be refused, are on the damage to the heritage of the building. Obviously, there's great improvements with the removal of that hideous extension. But could you just talk us through what you feel is being damaged in this application, and perhaps what could have been amended to make it slightly more palatable from a listed building consent angle?
Yep, so from a listed building point of view, we don't have any objection to the demolition of the existing outrigger. It's not in keeping with the character of the building, and we always welcome improvements to listed buildings. But as part of the planning balance, it's important for members to consider if those heritage benefits would outweigh the loss of a significant number of homes. I mean, in this particular case, our conservation team have reviewed the application and have determined that considered that the internal alterations at all levels of the building are harmful as well. So there are no real heritage benefits of this application to even as a starting point to consider sort of trumping the loss of that many units.
Could you just talk us through what those are in sort of specifics, if that's okay?
I'm actually going to chip in here just because I was making some notes as we were going along. So paragraph 6.3, Flora explains some of the internal alterations disrupting the illegibility of the historic floor plan, the central hallway and the partitions, how they align there, glass partitions, subdivision of rooms. I think when the applicant was speaking, they were talking about the upper levels and partitions being lost, but on the very top floor as a mansard, that if it's non-original, we'd be more comfortable with that. But some of those internal alterations in themselves just dilute any floor plan that's now left that we're concerned with. I think as well the isonometric drawings you will have seen in the submissions, there's not a very attractive rear extension, I think we can all agree, and that going isn't a problem. I think what goes back there should be sensitive, however, so where you look at the join in the roof and how that rear elevation is kind of pulled back, that's where we're talking about the concerns around the bulk and the, you know, how it manifests within that group and how we think it would look awkward. But members can come to a different view on that planning balance and harm. If we had a scheme in front of us that just improved living conditions and didn't lose so many units, you know, that harm may well have been justified, but we're concerned on the issues and balancing point at this point in time.
Madam Chair, looking at the case, this application, on the face of it, it looks a classical example of black and white. So it's one way or another. And I agree with the officers on that. But when you dig deeper, you are trying to turn 26 or 7 studio flats, which is very tiny, turning them into proper family homes. You could house 4, 5, maybe 6 families in this new building. So it's really tricky. But at the same time, we will be, if we vote for it, we will be breaking 12, 13 council policies. It's really tricky. Yeah.
It is really tricky, and you know, I really listen very carefully to what the applicants have to say. I guess my issue is with floors 1 and 2, where the entire floor is going to be flat, and I think there is an opportunity with those 2 floors to explore a couple more units, because I think it's a very big ask. I think, of course, we want to see the building back in use. I don't particularly have a problem with what's proposed at the back. I think if there were more units, it would outweigh whatever harm's been identified. But I think 27 to 7 is just a little bit too much. And I would suggest that there's a lot of really good things here, but maybe go and have a look at floor 1 and 2 again. That would be my feeling. Councillor Mackover.
Obviously, we can't redesign a scheme late at night on looking at this, but I'm struck by, and we all spend an enormous amount of care, which we have to do, on preserving and enhancing our listed heritage buildings. And these paragraphs are very stark, and it's very difficult, however much the other arguments might be persuasive or fair, is that if there's a harm being done to a heritage asset that we might be granting and allowing, that's very difficult for me to do, because we sit here and we have quite detailed discussions with very sincere and well-argued listed buildings experts explaining why one doorway or one passageway is significant. And this is not a tiny building. This feels imposing and important, and it feels like there's just, and obviously I've not been involved in any discussions, but it feels like there's just a better solution for this building that might be a variation of one of the many schemes that you have been looking at. But we just don't have it in front of us tonight, and we're not trying to decide between many different schemes. What this one and with the officer's report, it's difficult to find a way through. And I agree with Councillor Bakhtiar, is that there are lots of sensible things that have been argued and intelligently presented to us, but we have to look at the number of policies where we've got a very stark conflict. So yeah, it's a difficult one.
Very tricky. I agree with everything that Councillor Bakhtiar and Machover have said. Are there any other comments before we... Councillor Whedon-Sands.
Well, just to add, I agree with Councillor Machover. I mean, my personal view, slightly different to yours, Madam Chairman, if I may, is that, you know, it was back to your original point about the unit size and those two undersized units. Actually, I think I'm probably the opposite end in that I would have preferred 6 units where they were all reasonable living standards. I think that would have made a better choice, but that's my own personal opinion.
I actually think the argument that, you know, they're more affordable, maybe for younger people, make a comment. Look, I know it's against our policy, but you have to look at it in the round, right? And I think if we weren't losing so many units, I think we'd probably want to make some allowances, but I think, you know, losing 20 units is a big ask for this committee. So, regretfully, I think there's a lot going on here that we really like, and well, I think you put it really well, Councillor Bakhtiar, that we want to see the building back in use, and it can't go on as it is. But I think it's just a step too far, personally, regretfully. Any other comments before we move to a vote?
Maybe it's been mainly said by Councillor Whedon-Sands, but it could be on what we have been saying that there's an argument to say, right, if you want this building brought back into use and with with the full heritage benefits, this presents a different scenario for what we can present in terms of the layout. If we're going to respect everything about this listed building, then it might come up with quite a different scenario and not dictate a number of units first and then try and squeeze them in. So I don't know what the answer is, and I'm not pretending that we've got any information up here to do that. Yeah. But I respect what the applicant has tried to do, and maybe this is a steer to help the applicant discuss with officers, you know, what could reduce the number of harms and increase the number of benefits, and it might not be in the direction that everyone thinks it might go in, and I don't know the answer to that. But I just think there's probably a more satisfactory scheme. I don't know what it looks like, but what's in front of us today and what's in the officer's report, it's difficult.
Thank you. So
if I may, just on the floor plates that are being discussed, can I interject?
You can't. I'm
okay.
Sorry. We really have to work within the mechanisms that we have, and we've really heard you. And well, I hope some of what we've said is useful. Anyway, I think we should move to a vote. So the recommendation is to refuse the planning permission at... Just
so I agree with the reasons, with some of the reasons to refuse, but not all of them. So would it be possible to have a vote on refusal and then to vote on the reasons, or...
You can't take two. You can't, if you refuse, if you don't agree with our recommendation, it's not like you can propose. You can only propose to then approve. So I think you'd probably need to discuss each reason and decide which ones, if any, as a group you wanted to vote on having in the recommendation or not. So you can remove reasons for refusal.
Because we did similar on Hans Place when we refused it, but we didn't take all of your reasons.
Exactly. So we removed the design reason on that one. So it would be within your gift to do that if it was clear.
So, so I guess, so if Madam Chairman, if I might, just my view would be to remove reasons 1 and 2 and to reject it on 4, 5, 6, and then listed building 1 and 2. So that's the, you know, I think most of us have said, we're not against the idea of amalgamations and reconfigurations in principle. And then the issue with some of the flats being supposed significantly above minimum space standards, again, I'm not proposing it be rejected for that, but keeping the other reasons.
I mean, just a word of caution, if you don't have anything related to point 1, then you have no, you know, you're not raising a concern with the loss of homes. I mean, a lot of what you members were discussing is absolutely correct, I think. So this scheme that reduces unit numbers is probably going to be acceptable in this building, in my professional opinion. It's just maybe not 17 and maybe not with 2 that are too small. So it's not that these refusal reasons can't be overcome with a scheme that came back with, I don't want to give a number either, because it could be 6 units, could be less. You know, a better scheme could come forward. So all of them could be overcome. It's just, yeah, I would just caution you against removing any reference to the loss of homes, because that's been part of your discussion this evening.
I'm not sure it helps to remove the reasons at this point. I'm not sure, but... Okay, Councillor Bakhtia, what's your comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Reason 1, I think, is crucial because this is a policy, London policy. We don't have any say in that. I do remember, I've been a member of this committee for a long time, like Councillor Markova, we've been here for a long time. There were occasions we've allowed amalgamation of 2 flats. Because of family reasons, it was belonged to the same family. They had reasons to be separated, then they amalgamated. We did that, even though it was against our policies, but we took the circumstances in consideration. And reason 2 is the same, so I think, in my view, the reasons given by the officers is very good, so it's a good package. Thank you.
Okay, so what would you like to do? Do you want to vote on the application with all these conditions, or do you want to...
I've got one suggestion.
Go on. Fiona.
I'm so sorry, I have got one suggestion, just listening to your discussion. So, reason for refusal 1 could be edited to remove the net loss of 17 residential homes and just say would result in the loss of homes, rather than a specific number. That makes it, you know, less defined. And reason for refusal 2 could be edited to remove the paragraph as such the site could be reconfigured, so that it makes it the proposed flats are above the floor standards and would fail to optimise the potential of the site. Because that leaves it open then that you could optimise in a different way. It doesn't necessarily have to be with lots of units, and that might kind of soften them based on your discussions. Yeah, so it would be to delete the second sentence, so delete as such the site would be reconfigured. So just go, the proposed flats are significantly above the minimum space standards and would fail to optimise the housing potential on the site. Because the housing potential on the site could be read as, you know, you've got really quite small units on the site, some are unacceptable as it is. So how you realise that housing potential could be different. So it's just very slightly changing the language to reflect your discussions. And then any future scheme would have to overcome that reason and may well come in front of committee again. You never know.
Does that help with your concerns? It is our policy, so you might not like it, but that's what it says. I think the idea of taking out the number is helpful, because it suggests you could lose some. Yeah.
I mean, if I'm a lone voice, then you might as well just vote.
I think it's helpful to make the reasons less specific than they are. I think that is helpful. What do the others think? Councillor Bakhtia. Are you happy to go ahead with the vote based on those two reasons being amended as Ms. Ray has suggested? Okay, let's go ahead then. So
you'd probably have to propose that and then get someone to second it as an amendment.
Who would like to propose the... I'm not sure Councillor Whedon-Sands is up to that task. He's not going to do it. Okay, somebody else propose the motion to adjust the reasons for refusal.
I'll propose, as officers have said, come up with a picture that...
Thank you, Councillor Mackover. Who would like to second that proposal? Councillor Bakhtiar. So we'll take a vote now on the Planning Permission, and the recommendation is to refuse the Planning Permission at 24 Pembridge Square for the reasons given. Can those in favour, as amended, can those in favour of the recommendation please show? Thank you. And can those against please show? And abstentions? One abstention. So that is refused. And then we move on to the listed building consent. Do we need to look at the reasons here? Good reasons? Okay. So can we have a vote on the listed building consent? The recommendation is to refuse listed building consent for the reasons given in the report. Can those in favour of the recommendation please show? Can those against please show? And any abstentions please show? So that's one abstention. So listed building consent is also refused. Thank you. Thanks for waiting for so long as well. Let's move swiftly on to 71 Blenheim Crescent. I guess there's no presentation because we have no speakers.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as there are no speakers for this case, there's no presentation, but this application summary is for the installation of 2 external air conditioning units on the roof. The application is recommended for approval subject to the Council's standard noise conditions and for the reasons set out in the officer's report. Thank you.
I'm going to ask the question about the air conditioning unit. People get very upset about them and think they're going to be very noisy. So just so the committee is satisfied, has the applicant demonstrated through the noise report and all the measures taken of the placement of the air conditioning units that there will be no noise?
Yes, so the AC units are proposed at the roof level of quite a tall five-storey building, and it would be set away from neighbouring windows. And the application is also supported by an acoustic report which has been scrutinised by the Council's environmental health team, and they've recommended the standard conditions. So if the AC unit can effectively be heard by neighbours, the applicant would then be required to switch it off until it can then comply with the Council's noise criteria.
Thank you very much. So unless there are any other questions to officers, shall we move to a vote? So the recommendation is to approve the air conditioning application at 71 Blenheim Crescent. Can those in favour please show? Thank you. So that one is approved. The next application is at Broadwood Terrace and Pembroke Road. And again, there are no speakers for this application.
Yep, this application has come to committee because RBKC, the applicant, it's for external wall insulation, replacement windows, a second set of handrails to balconies and a guardrail on the roof, and it's recommended for approval subject to conditions, and it's all set out in the report.
So I did look at this application because it is within my ward, and I know many residents who live on this estate, and I've not had any complaints. In fact, people are quite happy that their homes are going to be upgraded. So I'm certainly in favour of this application. Any other comments, thoughts? Shall we move to a vote? The recommendation is to approve the application at Broadwood Terrace and Pembroke Road. Can those in favour please show? Thank you very much. So that one is also approved.
For this one, I just want to draw your attention to the addendum report, where there's just a tweak to the condition 6 regarding replacement trees.
What is the tweak?
The tweak is to refer specifically to the front garden tree, because as originally drafted, it was vague and it didn't refer to that specific tree. So the proposal is for front boundary alterations to the front courtyard, restoration of the front stucco, and changes to the rear windows at lower ground and ground floor level, and it's recommended for approval.
So just on the windows at the back of the terrace, so at ground floor and lower ground floor, what's the council's position on changes to windows at those levels?
The windows at the lower ground and the ground floor both exist at the moment. So at ground floor level, at lower ground floor level, it's to create some wide patio doors, which is pretty standard at that sort of lower ground floor basement level. And then on the ground floor level, it's an existing quite large door at the rear set in from the outrigger, and it's to be made wider. So we would assess the impact on design and daylight and sunlight overlooking, and because the windows are existing, so a number of the objections are about overlooking, but because the window is existing there, officers have assessed it and feel that the increase in the size of that opening doesn't actually increase the overlooking sufficiently to warrant refusal. And then the lower ground floor level, the windows and the doors are set within the boundary of the site, so there's no additional overlooking because of the boundaries that are protecting any views out.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Any other questions? Can we move to a vote? So the recommendation is to approve the application at 49 Scarsdale Villas. Can those in favour please show? Thank you, so that one is also approved. And then finally we come to the advertising hoarding at Cromwell Road. I mean, this is temporary hoarding for 8 months. Sorry.
Yep, no, that's literally just what I was going to say. It's come to committee because shrouds automatically come, so there are no objections either, and it's recommended for approval. The previous permission was granted for 8 months, and I think there's just been a delay in installation of the scaffolding, so it's come back again for a renewal starting in July this year.
Councillor Svidenik.
Do advertisements in the borough need to be illuminated? Is that not visually unappealing and perhaps a distraction for drivers? Is it illuminated just all throughout for 24 hours? Yeah, thank you.
It is externally illuminated, as per the previous one. There's no, we haven't got a time limit. We've only got a time limit on the time it's there for, and the brightness limit, and the hours of illumination. They can do it up to 10 o'clock actually. Sorry, condition 9, 10 o'clock.
Okay, so any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, so the recommendation is to approve the application at Cromwell Road. Can those in favour please show? 3 in favour. Can those against? And 2 against. So the application is approved. Thank you very much. I think that concludes our business. So we'll close the meeting. Thank you very much.
A point of order, Madam Chair.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
I should have mentioned from the beginning, but I kept it for the very late. A few years ago, I remember we had an application and nasty words were used and printed on the pack. So I would recommend, no nasty words tonight, but few pages are missing, printed, the public comments couldn't be read. So I would urge officers to check before printing what they are printing in the future. At the end of the pack.
Removed, or
sorry?
You mean comments have been removed?
No. You can't read it. Look
I
at
see
that.
what you mean. Yes, I did.
6, 7 pages are like that.
I did
Yeah.
notice that.
Check what you are printing, please. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and just to confirm, everything is on the website if you ever do get stuck, but we will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.